In the middle of the 19th century, the Qing dynasty stood at a crossroads. Devastated by rebellions, foreign invasions, and internal decay, China's last imperial dynasty seemed destined for collapse. But from the ashes of near destruction emerged one of history's most remarkable political comebacks, the Tongzhi Restoration. By 1860, the Qing Empire was hemorrhaging. The Taiping Rebellion had ravaged central China for over a decade, leaving millions dead. The Second Opium War had ended in humiliating defeat, with British and French forces occupying Beijing and burning the old Summer Palace. The Qing dynasty, in 1860, was facing what we might call a perfect storm of crises. Military defeat, economic collapse, administrative breakdown, all happening simultaneously. Most observers, both Chinese and foreign, expected the dynasty to fall. The Emperor Xianfeng had fled Beijing in disgrace. When he died in 1861, he left behind a 5-year-old heir, the future Tongzhi Emperor, and a power vacuum that threatened to tear the empire apart. Into this chaos stepped two remarkable women, Empress Dowager Cixi, the boy emperor's mother, and Empress Dowager Xian, his stepmother. In a palace coup that would reshape Chinese history, they seized control of the regency. But the real architects of the restoration were three Han Chinese officials who had risen through merit rather than birth: Zheng Guofen, Li Hongzhang, and Zhuo Zongtang. These men understood that China's survival depended not just on military victory, but on fundamental reform. What made the Tongzhi Restoration unique was this combination of Manchu political authority with Han Chinese administrative genius. The Empress Dowagers provided legitimacy. Men like Zheng Guofen provided the practical solutions. Zheng Guofen's strategy was revolutionary. Rather than relying on the corrupt banner armies, he created the Xiang Army, a professional force funded by local taxes and motivated by Confucian ideals. The tide began to turn. In 1864, Nanjing fell, and the Taiping Rebellion finally ended. But the Restoration's leaders understood that military victory was only the beginning. What followed was perhaps the most comprehensive reform program in Chinese history. The Tongzhi Restoration, as historians would later call it, sought to revive traditional Chinese values while selectively adopting Western technology. In 1861, the Zhongli Yamen was established, China's first modern foreign ministry. For the first time, the Qing government began to engage systematically with the Western world. The Tongzhi Restoration represented what we call Tiyong thinking, Chinese learning for the essence, Western learning for practical use. They wanted to preserve Confucian civilization while acquiring Western military and industrial technology. The self-strengthening movement began in earnest. Modern arsenals were built in Shanghai and Nanjing. The Jiangnan arsenal could produce rifles, cannons, and even steamships using Western machinery. Education reform followed. The Tongwenguan, China's first modern language school, trained diplomats and interpreters. For the first time in centuries, Chinese officials began learning foreign languages and studying Western science. Perhaps nowhere was the Restoration more successful than in military reform. Li Hongzhang created the Huai Army, incorporating Western training and equipment. For the first time, Chinese forces could match Western military technology. The ultimate test came with the Nian Rebellion in northern China. Using coordinated strategy and modern weapons, Li Hongzhang's forces systematically destroyed the rebel bands by 1868. The suppression of the Nian Rebellion demonstrated that the Qing military reforms were working. Chinese forces were now using Western tactics, Western weapons, and Western organizational methods, and winning. Even more impressive was Zhuo Zongtang's reconquest of Xinjiang. In a campaign lasting from 1876 to 1878, his forces marched across thousands of miles of desert to reclaim China's far western territories from Muslim rebels. The Restoration also revolutionized China's approach to international relations. The humiliating Treaty of Beijing in 1860 had seemed to reduce China to a semi-colony. But Restoration leaders turned diplomatic weakness into strategic opportunity. Rather than rejecting the treaty system, they learned to manipulate it. The principle of playing barbarians against barbarians allowed China to use foreign rivalries to its advantage. The Tongzhi Restoration marked China's first successful adaptation to the modern international system. They accepted the reality of Western power while working within that system to protect Chinese interests. The Marjorie Affair of 1875 showed how far China had come. When a British diplomat was murdered in Yunnan, the Qing government handled the crisis with sophisticated diplomacy, avoiding war while maintaining dignity. The Restoration extended beyond politics and military affairs into Chinese society itself. The examination system was reformed to include practical subjects alongside classical literature. Perhaps most remarkably, the Restoration leaders promoted what they called practical learning, the study of mathematics, engineering, and natural sciences that had been neglected for centuries. Women's roles also began to evolve. While still limited by traditional constraints, some elite women gained access to education and even influenced political decisions, most notably Empress Dowager Cixi herself. The economic dimension of the Restoration was equally impressive. The devastated tax system was rebuilt, with new taxes on trade compensating for lost agricultural revenues. Modern transportation began to develop. The first Chinese steamship companies were established, competing successfully with foreign firms on China's rivers and coasts. The economic policies of the Tongzhi Restoration showed remarkable pragmatism. They were willing to abandon traditional practices when they didn't work, while preserving what remained valuable in Chinese commercial culture. By 1870, China's economy was growing again. Agricultural production recovered, domestic trade revived, and even foreign trade began to show surpluses in some regions. By the early 1870s, the transformation was remarkable. The same dynasty that had seemed doomed in 1860 was now the recognized government of a united China, commanding respect from foreign powers and loyalty from its subjects. Foreign observers were amazed. The British diplomat Thomas Wade wrote in 1871, "The Chinese government has shown an energy and capacity for reform that few thought possible." The Tongzhi Restoration proved that traditional Chinese civilization was not incompatible with modernity. It showed that China could adapt and survive in the modern world while maintaining its essential character. The Restoration's crowning achievement was the young Tongzhi Emperor's assumption of personal rule in 1873. For the first time in over a decade, China had stable, legitimate government. But the Restoration's success contained the seeds of its own limitation. The death of the Tongzhi Emperor in 1875 ended the period of reform and consensus that had made the Restoration possible. Empress Dowager Cixi's choice of a new child emperor violated succession law and divided the court. The unity that had enabled reform began to fracture. The Tongzhi Restoration succeeded because it combined strong leadership with broad consensus about the need for change. When that consensus broke down after 1875, the reforms lost momentum. What, then, was the ultimate significance of the Tongzhi Restoration? In the short term, it saved the Qing dynasty and preserved Chinese unity for another half-century. But its deeper legacy lay in proving that Chinese civilization could adapt to modernity without losing its essential character. The Restoration created precedents and institutions that would influence China long after the Qing dynasty fell. The Tongzhi Restoration established the pattern for all subsequent Chinese modernization, selective adaptation of foreign techniques within a framework of cultural continuity. This remains the Chinese approach to modernization today. The Restoration also demonstrated the importance of pragmatic leadership and institutional reform. Men like Zheng Guofan and Li Hongzheng showed that effective governance required both moral authority and technical competence. Perhaps most importantly, the Tongzhi Restoration proved that even the most severe crises could be overcome through determined leadership and intelligent reform. It remains one of history's most successful examples of national renewal. The Tongzhi Restoration lasted barely 15 years, but its impact resonated through Chinese history. It showed that tradition and modernity need not be enemies, that a civilization could honor its past while embracing its future. In an era when China once again seeks to balance tradition with modernization, the lessons of the Tongzhi Restoration remain as relevant as ever. Sometimes, the greatest victory is not conquering others but conquering oneself.
Thanks for watching.